Hello and welcome to the eOrganic webinar on the economics of organic dairy farming with Dr. Bob Parsons. My name is Deb Haliba and I work at the University of Vermont Extension as eOrganic's Dairy Team Coordinator. eOrganic is the organic agriculture community of practice with eExtension, and you can find all of our published articles, videos, and upcoming and recorded webinars on our website at extension.org/organic_production. Dr. Bob Parsons is an extension agricultural economist in the Department of Community Development and Applied Economics at the University of Vermont. Bob conducts extension programs on business management, farm succession, ag labor management, and risk management. In addition, he teaches undergraduate courses including agricultural policy. His research has included a project which we will focus on today, where Bob has been collecting and analyzing financial data from Vermont organic dairy farms for 8 years now. Bob, thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. As I'm going through this, we're going to be talking about organic dairy, and we're taking a look at the sustainability and particularly that economic sustainability of the organic dairy farms, and just how strong is that economic leg of economic sustainability of organic dairy. Let's see here. What am I doing here? Deb, do I have control yet? There we go. I want to acknowledge support here. This research has been funded by the USDA through 2 different grants. We've also had support from the University Ag Experiment Station, NOFA Vermont, Organic Valley, and we couldn't do it without the participating Vermont organic dairy farmers who have participated. Okay, a little bit of background. We've had a lot of organic dairy growth in the Northeast since the 1990s. We had 2 organic dairy farms in, I think, 1993 in Vermont, and it's grown tremendously to where we have over 200 farms today. There were always a lot of questions on how profitable are those organic guys. I hear they get 22 bucks a hundred. Wow, if I got that, I'd be set up for life. Well, no one really knew how profitable they were. So myself and some extension staff here in Vermont, we teamed up with some people also at the University of Maine for the first 2 years, as well as NOFA Vermont, and we got some funding and we went out to get some answers. And this has resulted in, to my knowledge, this is the largest ongoing economic study of organic dairy in the U.S. that's been going every year. Okay, we started out with 30 farms in 2004. There was an earlier study that looked a little bit of the economics of organic dairy in 1999, but through the year, we have Maine involved for 3 years. And since 2007, it's just been Vermont. And so we've had about 30 to 40 farms in this study every year. So we do have a pretty decent sized sample. When we take a look at what you want to do this, we make a trip to the farm. And that is an experienced extension economist going out. We get the data from the farm. We get the record book, and we use the farmer's tax forms, double check everything seems to be right and it's in balance. We obtain their cash flow, and we develop their balance sheets, and we develop an accrual-adjusted income statement for that farm from the information we got there. We also do the logical stuff that you do, that anyone that does that works with farmers. Okay, was there a little bit of personal gas involved, included in the expenses for the fuel? Was there any household expenses that accidentally got on the Schedule F by some reason? What kind of business structure it is? We adjusted all the farms so they would be a sole proprietorship. And that we used to come up with our data then that we analyzed. As we take a look at a quick overview, not only is it fast growing, we now have 22% of the dairy farms, 8% of the milk production in Vermont. The vast majority of our organic farms are small size. Small, what does that mean? Average herd size in Vermont is 140 cows, about the same as the national average. We have the vast majority of our organic dairy farms are under 70 cows. Vast majority of them are also conventional farms that transitioned to organic. They were generally pasture-based before they went organic, and most of them have generally stayed about the same size as when they were conventional. it has been a success. Obviously, if you've got grow from 2 to 200 in a little over a decade, something is going right. But what is that future going to be for these organic dairy farms? This is a graph here of our dairy farms in Vermont. We have the blue line that shows a continual decline of our total number of farms. And our organic dairy farms have been going up to about 200 and about stayed there right now. Right now, we are at 900 dairy farms altogether in Vermont. Less than 3 years ago, we had 1,000. So we're losing about 4% of our dairy farms a year, yet our organic dairy farms are remaining pretty steady. Okay, when we start taking a look at what we've had for organic, first thing most people want to know, what's the milk price? What are they getting? Well, back in 1999, you're getting $22.80, and that kind of stayed even until about 2004, going into 2005. Starting about 2006, we saw organic milk prices starting to bump up, and they have stayed at that level just about $30 until 2011. In the last year, we've seen about nearly a $3 increase in organic milk price, and the farmers were complaining they couldn't make their cost. And I think we'll see a later graph where you'll see this, because from 2008 to 2011, while milk prices have remained the same, I don't know anyone that will tell you that real estate taxes, John Deere parts, labor, or feed has remained the same price. So the cost to produce this milk has gone up in that time period. It sounds like what the conventional farmers say all the time. Remarkable there. Let's go on. Okay, a little slow here. When we take a look at some of the trends over the last 4 years, we're seeing a milk price that has been hanging around the $30 until we get to $33 in 2012. Our milk per cow, very consistent over the years of our study, ranging from about 13,500 to 12,500. It's always been in this range of milk production per cow. Our herd size have been generally small. This is altered a little bit because we have 2 farms in the study that are 200 cows or more, and they are not included in this data set. So we didn't want them included, and it's kind of skewing the data. When we start taking a look at a financial basis for the farm, we're seeing that these farms have seen their gross revenue hanging about $250,000. This year it jumped up to $280,000. You have $3 extra per hundredweight, you get more milk, you get more money. Expenses, though, have been going up gradually. 200,000, 205, 220, 230,000. And so what you've been seeing is the net farm revenue has been declining, and that we're actually seeing that the return on assets in these farms is only running about 2%, and then in 2010 and 11, less than 1%. So that's about the level you could get from your bank putting your money in one of the savings accounts where they say they pay you maybe 0.5% interest. But our dairy farmers were not making very much money at this time period. Now, whenever you look at some of these things on a per cow basis, we start seeing the revenue you can generate on a per cow, and you take a look at it a little bit more whenever you start getting a little bit more milk production. But then you take a look at that feed per cow. Farmers were spending about $1,200 a cow. In the last 2 years, it's cost $200 to $300 more to feed that cow, and that's primarily with purchased grain. Our repairs and supplies are our next highest expense in the farms. That's been going up a little bit. And then you have labor, depreciation, fuel, and you end up taking a look at that if you're grossing $4,000 a cow, but if it's costing you $4,000 to get the milk out of the cow, and you're only getting $4,500 gross, that only gives you $500 per cow. Now stop and think a little bit. What do I need to support my family? If I need $40,000 and I'm making $500 a cow, I need 80 cows. If I can do better and get $1,000 a cow, I only need 40 cows. And if I can make $40,000 out of 1 cow, maybe have her give marijuana or something like that. I don't know what you'd have to do, but then you just have to milk one cow. But as that revenue per cow and that net revenue per cow decreases, what ends up happening that the farmer has no choice but to try to increase his milk production or get more milk and get that revenue up, because what he's trying to do is support the family living. And family living has been going up at a rate of inflation faster than what our milk production or costs have gone. When we take a look at at our research group here, we see here that of our mix here, that most of the cows, most of the herds are in this 40 to 60 cow range. We've got 2 or 3 in the study that are up there about a little bit more than 80 cows. And we actually have a couple herds that are in under 30 cows. But we're seeing there that these herds are not very big in size. What are their milk production? Here again, you can start to take a look and see, even though the average is running about 12,000, we've got 1 herd, 2 herds that are up above 18,000 pounds. These were 2 herds that were conventional. They fed a lot of grain. They're still feeding a lot of grain, and they're getting a lot of milk. They also have high grain price, grain bills to pay. But we've got this little even distribution, but we still have a majority of our herds are in there that 10 to 13,000 pounds milk per cow. Okay, what of our expenses? Well, there's no doubt about it here that our feed is the highest expense, and it comes in at about 36% of total expenses are spent on purchased feed. Now, in Vermont, we only have 1 farm in the study here that tries to raise a little bit of grain. We have 2 that are raising a small amount of corn silage. So the vast majority, this is an expense for purchased grain. And consistently over the years of the study, the amount of purchased feed that was forage was usually anywhere from like 4 to 7%. So it's consistently, this feed represents buying commercial grain to feed the dairy cows. And you see there, everything else is spread out a little bit, but the biggest cost on this farm is the feed, and followed by repairs and supplies, labor, and depreciation. Okay, net farm revenue before charge for owner labor. Okay, what this means is we haven't put a charge in yet for the farm unpaid family labor that is working on this farm. And what should that farmer be paid? Well, that's a hard question to come up with. So we say, well, you should be able to draw enough out to support your family living. And for this figure, we were using $36,000 that should be representing a small amount to pay for family living expenses. Well, if you take a look on here, all the farms that are making less than $35,000, $36,000, they can't even meet family living expenses. And so you take a look at that and goes 8 and 4, 12 and 4, 16, and we got 34 farms in the study, and go, wow, almost half of the farms in the study can't make enough to pay the owner-operator a minimum amount of $36,000 to support his family. This represents a real challenge for any farm that's trying to operate. Do you live off of off-farm income? Do you live off of less money? How do you do that? But it shows you that this is not really a whole lot of profitability. Yet, up at the other end, we have 2 farms that they netted more than $100,000. They can take their family living out of that, and they have a lot left over to pay for reinvestments in the farm. Return on assets. This is ROA. This is a way to compare the relative return. And again, we're seeing here that we've got a big chunk of our farms that are losing equity. And they're living off of borrowed money, or they're losing money. They're not even making a positive return on your assets. To put this in another perspective, if you decide to stay at home and not work, you would probably come out better because you wouldn't lose money. And if you wanted to exercise, you could go join an athletic club, but then if you, on a cold morning when you got up, you wouldn't have to go to the athletic club if you didn't want to. If you're a dairy farmer, you don't have that choice of going to the athletic club, which is represented by going out and milking the cows. So this return on assets really doesn't look real strong for this industry. We have some herds that are doing fairly well, but we have a lot, nearly half, that really aren't doing that well for return on assets for 2012. And 2012 was better than 2011. Debt to asset ratio, interest is not a major factor in most of these farms. That we only have actually 3 farms that have a debt to asset ratio worse than 40%. Most of these farms are relatively low debt, so that's not a factor that comes into play into how much money these farms are making. Now, so we take a look at the bird's eye view here. So profitability has improved in 2012, primarily due to the $3 increase in milk price. But our expenses are still going up. 16 of the farms out of 34 didn't make a $36,000 family living. Are those farms sustainable? Not from an economic perspective, if you're going to try to be losing money. Now, there is quite a range within the average. So to really get this a little better, we should probably break this down into the profit groups. Another way of looking at that is, and this came from Glenn Shirk, who used to be an extension dairy agent in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. He said, you know, if you have 1 foot in a bucket of liquid nitrogen, the other in a foot of boiling water, you know, on average, you're feeling pretty good. But you got some problems there. So let's take a look at these herds and separate them by their high group, mid group, and low group. The low and high group each have 11 farms in, and the mid-profit group has 12 farms in. Now we take a look at here, well, how many cows do these farms have? Well, the farms that make more profit have more cows. Well, that may be unsurprising, but our mid-group is actually the people with the smallest herd. Now let's take a look at milk production per cow. Again, our most profitable group has the most milk per cow. And in this case, our middle group is actually making more milk than our low profit group. So here we're taking a look at that our high group is milking, you know, almost 20 cows or 10 cows more, and they're also getting, what is this, about 2,500 pounds of milk more per cow. Okay, so they've got a lot more milk to sell. Then there's another thing that comes into this. What are they getting for milk price? Well, our high group tends to be a group that tend to be jerseys. They get a higher components for their milk, and most of these guys are capturing every quality bonus they can. And they're actually averaging far more, nearly $2 more per hundredweight than the low profit group. So if you want to take a look at that high profit group, okay, you're producing more, you have more cows, you're producing more milk per cow, and you're getting more for your milk than the other 2 groups. It doesn't take too much logic there to come up with the fact that they're probably making a little bit more money. That's why they're the high profit group. Okay, revenue per cow, nearly 1,600 difference between the high and the low groups. When we take a look at purchase feed, well, the high group is buying more grain. That probably helps explain why they're getting more revenue per cow. They're paying for the grain, getting more milk production. But if you get the revenue, you can afford the grain. So where is that balance there for most farms? Return over feed cost. And this is what we're talking a lot more in the dairy world today is what is your margin? Well, when you take a look at this a little bit, our high group has $3,200 per cow that they can spend on other stuff after they pay the feed. The low group only has $2,300. So that's $900 less that they can use to spend for the electric bill, pay for family living, or pay for other stuff. Repair supplies. Well, I think the graph is a little bit disproportional here. There's really, between the low and the high group, there's only $22 per cow difference. But our mid group, boy, they seem to be able to watch that dollar a lot bit, and they try to make it up by having lower expenses. Labor expenses, again, the high group is the most expensive. They have a little bit more money to spend. If we take our depreciation, now we see our mid group, they spend the most on depreciation. And so custom hire, again, our high group is the lowest, and our mid group is in there with lower, and our low group spends the most. So you end up taking a look at some things here, and our low group seems to have high expenses and low income. That's not the way to run a farm if you want to make a profit. Fuel costs, again, we're getting a range there between the farms. And so when we take a look at our expenses per cow, there really isn't a whole lot of difference here as much as we see on the revenue side. We see about a $400 range from the lowest, which is mid-group profit group, to the highest expense, which is our high profit group, but then they've got the money to spend. And so when we get down then to net revenue by the group, the low profit group, they're only getting a small amount of revenue of their net farm revenue, and out of this, they're supposed to pay for family living expenses and then reinvestment in the farm. You're going to do that on $6,000. The high group, they've got $90,000. So we have a group that is really doing quite well. Our mid group is, they're treading water, but the low group is really in some problems. Net profit by cow, there again you get the same story. And so when we take a look at our return on assets, whereas we averaged 1.84, our low profit group is averaging 2.25. Our high group is doing what? They're averaging nearly 6% return on assets. So we've got some real things going on here that we're trying to figure out. But boy, this takes that average and tears it apart and allows us to look at these farms individually a little closer and put them in groups where they're more closer together, and we can see some real distinct differences in the management and the returns on these dairy herds. Again, our debt to asset ratio, our low profit group tends to have a little bit higher debt to asset ratio. Our high group is more likely to be out of debt. They're also more likely to have just low debt, but they're also able to operate without borrowing as much money, and they have the income to repay loans. This is a business, no matter how you want to think about it, no matter how you're farming and how your economic sustainability really affects what your social and environmental sustainability is of these organic dairy farms. How sustainable are you if you're not going to be able to pay yourself and make your payments as they come due? So as we take a look at this, we take a look at the groups, it doesn't take too much to come up with that the profit is associated with more cows per farm, higher production per cow, and a higher milk price, all of which are the result of the management that is in place on these farms. We're getting more revenue per cow for the higher profit group. That allows them money to do what? They can pay expenses. They can afford to pay a little extra labor because they're going to be able to pay people that are, come in and help them and give them some time off. They're able to pay for their family living, and they're kind of able to pay for those extras in life. Like, can they get some new equipment? Can they reinvest in the farm? Can they actually go out and maybe take a vacation? Wow, miss maybe a couple milkings. So we've really got a situation here. Now, the expense side, we're seeing a little bit of variation in the expense. That we only see $300 difference between the bottom group and the most group with the highest expense. So we take a look at this a little bit. Okay, our top group is profitable, our mid group is treading water, but our bottom group, how long can these farms survive as being organic dairy farms or as being a dairy farm? Because the option to go to conventional is only going to make things worse for them. There's a real question here when you take a look at this sector and say, how are we going to maintain the supply of organic milk in the Northeast for our suppliers if we have a third of these farms that are really kind of economically on the edge? And the other aspect that comes in with these least profitable farms, there's less likely that there's going to be another generation taking over the farm. One of these farms in particular last year, there was a father and son. The father was working off the farm, and he was thinking, well, we're getting into the hay season. He really needed to be at home more. He decided to quit his job, and he thought it was good. Maybe it would respond in milk production. They didn't get an increase in milk production. So by the end of the summer, his son is now working off the farm. Basically, their farm is not generating enough money to pay for two families full time. Somebody has to work off that farm. And so that comes to a question about, is there going to be anybody that wants to take over that farm? And how will it ever pay for retirement for the retiring generation? A real farm transition dilemma. Now, when we take a look at these farms, I want to pull out two farms that are somewhat different. These guys don't feed any grain. None. They don't buy it. It's all forage. The one farm feeds minerals. They don't feed any grain. Can you be profitable and not feeding grain? Well, they don't have a feed bill that's up there around $1,000 to $1,200 a cow. They got low milk production. But let's take a look at these two farms a little closer. We have Farm 1 and Farm 2. The one's getting a little bit more for his milk, substantially more for his milk. He's getting more components. He has more color breeds, whereas the other is more primarily Holstein. Now, we're down here at 8,700 or 9,400 pounds of milk per cow. But remember, there's no grain bill. Herd size, one's 43, the other's 55. Take a look at the milk per cow. But take a look at the net farm revenue. 59,000 and 54,000. Now, if you have 59,000, you can take $36,000 after family living, and you still have 23,000 left over to invest into the farm. We have 16 farms in this study who are not making enough to pay themselves $36,000. Here's two guys that are not paying grain, and they're able to pay themselves $16,000. You know, makes you scratch your head a little bit. Their return on assets, one is at 5%, the other is at 4.5%. Now, we take a look at their expenses, revenue per cow. Well, you don't have high revenue whenever you're not getting a lot of milk, but take a look at that feed cost per cow. One guy is spending a full $63 for minerals per cow basis. The other guy, $0. He also is lucky because he doesn't have any paid labor on the farm. He has a son that's working for him, who's his son that's in high school, and he is not getting any paid labor, and he isn't driving yet, so he doesn't have any gas or anything like that we can throw in the labor. But their repairs and supplies are high. I think they make more hay than their neighbors do. The one guy has substantially more depreciation, and that was just some recent purchases that he's made in the last couple of years. And one of the things that he did when he was paying grain, he said he couldn't afford to buy replacement equipment. Now that he's not feeding grain, he can afford to buy replacement equipment. And you get into the point that the one has net revenue per cow of $1,376 and the other at $986. Now, I think we need to scratch our head on something like that. You know, is that the way to farm organically? I'm sure some people say no, but these guys, from these figures, make it look like they're making it work. Now, those headings up there for 2009 and 2010, that was my mistake in the way I headed up the column there. So that was from an old graph, and I put new numbers in. Okay, so does no grain pay? Get lower milk production. You don't have that $1,000 per cow grain bill. It's only pasture and hay. The one guy that's a little bit more profitable here, he figures out how much hay he needs, and he makes hay until he has enough, and then he quits baling hay. He pastures the cows. He stops running the tractors. And he makes sure he has a reserve left over, but he said, well, if I don't need the hay, why should I make it? You have to think about it. They seem to have higher repairs, but they have a very good net return per cow and a return on assets that's well above average. So what do you think about that? Just throwing that out there. Scratch your head over that and see what you think. Is that something that more people should be thinking about? Maybe so. Now, we always complain about the conventional dairy farmers talked about the treadmill, technological treadmill. You get on, you got to run faster just to keep up. Well, let's take a look at the organic treadmill and take a look and see how that compares to similar sized conventional dairy farms, and these are farms that have under 90 cows. They average somewhere usually about 60 to 70 cows. When we take a look at this, what is the pounds of milk per cow? Well, consistently we've had this, 12, 13,000 pound milk per cow for the organic. Well, our conventional farms have been running about 18,500 to 19,500 during the whole time of the study. And so they're on average getting somewhere about 5,000 to 6,000 pounds milk more per cow in your conventional herds. What about milk price? Well, while you start seeing a kind of fairly steady aspect there of milk prices for the organic, the conventional, they're going through that every 3-year seesaw. Price is up, price collapse, price goes up, price collapses. And so that does affect the returns on the organic, on the conventional dairy farms. Milk sales per cow. We've had a couple of years here, like 2004 or 5, 2007, in 2011, where milk sales per cow have been almost identical between the organic and the conventional. Lower price, more milk versus higher price, less milk. And a lot of times it's been coming out fairly close. The years that there's a substantial difference there, particularly in 2006 and 2009, occurred whenever we've had a milk price collapse. And that's why a lot of people got out of organic, or got out of conventional and went organic because they didn't like these price swings. Purchase feed per cow. One of the things that we've seen is that since 2007, we have seen the price of organic and conventional feed go up. And that really affects what we've been spending, but it sure made it a little nicer back in 2004 and 2005, where people were only spending $800 to $900 of, per cow for feed. Now they're up there about $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 for some herds. And that is after the farmer has probably also reduced his protein content and is changing his contents and feeding less grain per cow. This has been a major expense for the organic as well as the conventional. Fuel costs, the organic farms do not spend as much on fuel as do our conventional dairy farms. I'm not sure if that was all higher fuel cost in 2008 for the conventional. I think it was higher cost per unit, and it kind of went down, and it came right back up again. But, excuse me, your conventional dairy farms tend to be doing more harvesting of crops, and particularly maybe trying to raise some grain and more likely corn silage. So their fuel costs per cow going up. Profit per cow. This is what it comes to. And in 2009, if you had any conventional neighbors, they remember that. That was a disaster. It was a nightmare. It was worse than that. But what you've seen here is that our profit per cow has been more consistent with the organic. But if you see, when we had the price rise for organic milk back in 2006, we had a lot of profitability on our organic dairy farms in 2006. That's what helped convince, as well with a lower conventional milk price. Whenever we had 80 farmers that transitioned from our conventional to organic in 2006, it didn't take too much to convince them. Milk price and profitability is going down for conventional, it's going up for organic. That's where I'm going. But since then, we've seen this kind of gradual decline until we've seen a price rise this past year. And this is a real challenge for these farms, is how do you keep your things in place? How do you keep that profitability up? Because whenever you have a consistent milk price, even if it's contract over a 4-year period, those expenses keep going up, and the returns that are available to the farmer to repay his debt, to pay for family living, and pay for reinvestment, he has less money every year. When we take a look at the return on assets, you see the same thing. But you take a look here. Well, conventional was organic actually lost money in 2004 and 2005. 2006, organic's up, conventional's down. Next year, they're both doing decent. And then you have organic through the milk price disaster 2009. Conventional back up last year. This year, conventional is just breaking even, just about zero. And so organic was more profitable. And so we take a look at this. Organic as a whole, how does it compare to the conventional and similar size herds? Well, your return on asset, if you take a look at the score, out of 4 years, the conventional, or out of 9 years, conventional won by 4, organic won 4 years, and there was a toss-up in year 1. So, you know, organic is still a treadmill. Maybe it doesn't travel as fast as the conventional treadmill. Maybe it's a little wider. Maybe the slope's set at a different angle, but it's still a treadmill that the producer's on. They have the same pressures to control costs. They have to almost increase production and revenue somehow to stay even with inflation and keep that family living covered. I'd say from this, if you want to take a look at this, it doesn't look like organic is the road to riches for the typical farmer. It doesn't mean that some of them have not done very well, but it's not a road to riches. It has helped to provide a lifeline for some farmers. It's enabled some farmers to remain with their small herd, with their infrastructure they have, with their barns and their current facilities and their current equipment, and keep operating. Because if these farmers that are a small size herd, if they decided to try to stay conventional, they would not be able to even get their foot in the door and try to survive with the fluctuating milk prices that we have in the conventional market. But you get a look at these. We've done some interviews with the organic farmers, and we have about 3/4 of them that believe that they wouldn't even be in business today had they stayed conventional. So the conclusion from that has to be is that organic has been very important in keeping many of these smaller farmers active and involved and in producing milk within their communities. And so when we take a look at this now, what is where are we looking at here now? We still have the bottom third of our organic dairy farmers. They're stressed if they're going to stay in business. They have to figure out something to try to get a little bit more profitability, either control the costs, or they have to maybe hopefully get more milk, more money for their milk. Most of the times when you're at a dairy meeting, it seems like a higher milk price is the solution to every problem. You know, sun didn't come up on time this morning, we need higher milk prices. It was a little cold today, get us higher milk prices, we'll take care of that. A little dry last year, if I had higher milk prices, we'd solve all our problems. Jimmy didn't come home from school today on time. Well, if we had higher milk prices, that might solve that problem too. But it's the general trend in dairy farmers. But this group, how are they going to survive economically and how sustainable are they? The middle third of our dairy farms, they tend to be your cost minimizers. They try to keep their costs down to a minimum, and they're doing okay. They're treading water. They're covering family living, but it's not a whole lot extra left over. They're under a 2% return on assets, which isn't much of a return if you have $600,000 equity in your farm system. These guys are going to be challenged even just to stay even. They have to do something else to become more profitable, or else they're going to maybe be joining the unprofitable group. The top group, there's some real profit in this group. There's a couple farmers in there that are doing extremely well. There's one farmer that's been in our study every year for 9 years, just keeps chopping along at 50 cows and is netting anywhere from $1,300 to $1,500 per cow every year. You go there and he just does everything so simple. He keeps his expenses down. You go there and you kind of scratch your head. He goes, how could somebody be making so much money? And you look on his expense side and you go, you mean he couldn't even exaggerate to come up with some extra expenses to put on his schedule? He's very honest, but he is making a lot of money by keeping the system as simple as possible, and he's an excellent grazer. So this story of success maybe isn't coming from much what the farmer is able to produce, but more of the management skills of how they employ the assets that they have available to them. Some people were able to get more milk per cow. Some people are doing a much better practice on grazing. One of the problems we see on some of these farms is I'm surprised that we don't see more of them doing intensive management grazing with the small plots and moving their cows more often. But somehow that doesn't seem as prevalent as you would think it would be with all the assistance that's available through NOFA and through the pasture research program here at UVM and through NRCS. There's something there on managing the pastures I think people need to do, because it would also help reduce feed costs if they could get more protein out of their pasture and more protein out of their feed. So what's the future? Well, you know, organic fits in very well with the dairy farms here in the Northeast. Frankly, we've got a couple thousand cow herds in the state, and it's pretty darn hard to get 1,000 cows at one site in Vermont, have enough feed, and be able to spread the manure. We're not going to have 5,000 cow farms in Vermont, not at one location. Organic fits in with a lot of our mountain valleys, and especially through the Northeast Kingdom. It provides a lot of opportunities for our smaller sized dairy farms to still continue to produce in the community. I was also involved a year ago with Jeff O'Hara at the Union of Concerned Scientists, and we did a community impact economic study. And our findings out of that found out that similar sized farms, an organic farm, will produce more positive impact than a conventional dairy farm on the local economy. That turned out to be some interesting aspects. But if you want to think of some of the aspects of some of our larger farms and some of the things that they have, a lot of them hire Hispanic and Hispanic labor. Where do the wages go from those laborers? It goes by Western Union back home. It's not being redistributed within the community. I'm not condemning the employees. That is the way the system is, and a person has a right to spend their money where they are. But whenever you have the larger farm and it's operating as more likely several small organic farms that are family operated, that money stays within the community. And that does have an impact on the community economic development. Cost structure, it doesn't matter how you take a look at it and how you manage your costs. It would be hard to believe that equipment and other repair costs are going to go down. I don't believe that John Deere is going to lower prices on their parts or their equipment. Their equipment is more complex and it's more complicated and it's more expensive. Getting somebody to fix that equipment is more expensive. Getting someone to fix the milk equipment is getting more expensive. Our feed has been getting more expensive. Maybe that could come down in price some if we have a change in our supply and demand, but our general costs of operating the farm are going to go up. Family cost of living, anybody that believes that's going to come down, I've got some oceanfront property in Nevada to sell you. But whenever we take a look at this, what is that going to mean if we take a look that our cost structure is more likely going to keep going up? What's going to happen to organic milk prices? Can they continue to jump another $3? Whenever you start talking about some of our processors and some of the retailers, they really start questioning about how much milk they might be able to sell to the public if they have to keep raising the milk price. If the consumer balks at paying a higher price for organic milk, what is that going to mean for the price that the farmer is going to receive for their milk? It all goes together here. You can't pay more for the organic milk if you're going to sell less of it. There is some things that just don't work out very well. So what is going to happen to that organic milk price that the farmer receives? Can that price increase allow the farmer to stay even with this expensive? Or slowing down of price increases, is that going to force the farmers to do what? The same thing that they had whenever they were in the conventional market. You have to increase revenue. You're in the dairy business. I've got no choice but to increase my herd size and try to get more milk per cow. Is that where we're headed? I don't know, but I think into some real questions. I think the industry really needs to question itself. So I've tried to go through that in good order. Hopefully I didn't put everybody asleep. And if anybody has some questions, I'll try to take those at this time.
Great, thank you, Bob. Bob, milk production is influenced by cattle breed. What's the predominant breed used to produce 12 to 13,000 pounds of milk in your study?
Everything that you could think of. A lot of our cows are Holstein. I think there's probably an equal amount that's Jersey, and organic dairy farmers have been breeding every crossbreed that you could imagine. I think there might be a couple that might even be crossbreeding with moose to see if they get better grazing. So I think, generally it's split between the Holstein and the Jersey, but you see a lot of crossbreeding with lineback, Dutch belted, and even interbreeding between the Jerseys and the Holsteins to try to get animals that will graze a little better.
Okay, great. Were there any Amish or Mennonite producers in the study?
Okay, this is Vermont. There would be 2 farms that I know that are Mennonite.
Okay.
And one of them is one of the more profitable farms. So, and the other one isn't far behind.
Okay. This person says, I assume net farm income is also before principal payments on debt and capital purchases? Question mark.
Yes, that is correct. You're paying off the expenses, and interest is a cost of production. Principal payments are not. But if it's a principal payment for a barn or a piece of equipment, that tends to be picked up in the depreciation charge. So a lot of your principal payments for land, though, that has to come out of profit.
Okay. Someone just asked about your slides, and I did pop in the chat pod link to the slides, but I'm just doing that again. So for folks that are interested in those are right. There's a PDF of them right there, and it's also on the webinar page where you came to register for the webinar. Okay, next question is, do you have a debt per cow by profitability group? Did you already address that, Bob? That came in the middle.
I didn't do a debt per cow. No, I didn't do a debt per cow.
Okay, and how about a non-farm income by profitability group or by farm size?
Okay, I did not, none of the net farm, off-farm income does not figure into this, but yet it does because, let's face it, if you have a nice off-farm income, that allows the farm then to maybe pay down more debt and live off of the off-farm income. But for these calculations for return, we still make the analogy that the farm operator should still be paid $36,000 for his time and effort.
Okay, and so did you account for the additional unpaid family labor beyond the $36K?
No.
Okay. Alrighty. Okay, so for the no grain folks that you had in your study, do you know what the acres per cow would be for that?
No, I do not.
Okay.
I could probably figure it out from looking at 2 different, some surveys that we took a couple years back, but take me a few minutes to get those up. But they had more than adequate enough ground to produce all the hay and pasture because one had 0 purchase of feed, so he didn't even purchase any hay, and the other farm was only minerals, so that they did have adequate land base for their herd to do the grazing and meet all their winter hay requirements that they had.
And do you recall the total acres per cow for forage-only herds? You probably
no, I didn't.
Don't have that at your fingertips. No. Yeah.
No.
All right. For the comparison between the conventional and organic, conventional numbers were coming from where? The Northeast Dairy Farm Summary?
Northeast Dairy Farm Summary, and they break their herds out into groups by herd size. So I took their smallest herd size, and for 2012, that was for farms with 99 cows or fewer, and I think they averaged 71 cows in the group. So we're looking at farms that were 71 cows average to the organic, which were at 58, 59 29 cows average.
Alrighty.
One aspect that you could say about the Northeast Dairy Farm Summary, those farms tend, the general belief would be in the financial community is that those farms probably tend to be more profitable, tend to be less, lower debt than the probably general population of farms that size.
Okay, thank you. Were any of the farms engaged in value-added production?
No.
Okay, so just strictly.
There were no cheesemakers in this, study at all.
Oh.
And we even asked the farmers if they sold any raw milk, and most of the farms all the farms, raw milk was a very inconsequential sale, and a number of them that are saying that just due to insurance regulations, they don't want to go there.
Okay, here's an opinion question. What do you think about the price of a half a gallon of organic milk in the store for over $4 and close to $5? Do you have any information on equation between farm gate and retail?
Not that I'm familiar with, and I haven't actually calculated that out to see what the percentage of the farmer's share of the consumer dollar is. It could be easily calculated out.
Yeah.
Take your $34 per hundredweight and divide by like 11.6 gallons. That gets you your price per gallon. Compare that to your gallon in the store, and do the division and see what percentage of that retail milk price goes to the farmer. Generally, I know in the conventional world, I think it's less than 40% of your of the consumer's dollar for a gallon of milk goes to the farmer. And I don't know what I haven't figured that out, but it wouldn't take too much to make a real quick calculation on it.
Okay, great. And what kind of grazing do the Vermont grass-fed dairies use?
You name it, it's out there.
What was that? Say that again. I didn't
you
quite
name it. You name it, they use it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're talking about like management-intensive grazing?
I think so.
We have farms out there that have, we have conventional farms that have real flat, real excellent crop ground that they've converted to pastures and are doing, moving their cows every day or twice a day. We have guys that are, primarily through the Northeast Kingdom, and they're farming primarily hillsides, and they're pasturing the best way that they can manage those hillsides. So we've got permanent pastures, land that's been converted from crop ground, and we have a lot of farmers that make, do a little bit of grazing and still make hay off of some of their ground, depending on how their season goes. If that answers the question a little bit, but we still have a number of herds that probably don't make as much effort as they should to try to move the cows to an area of new grass as often as they should. And I think that would be a big improvement on some of them to just get better feed quality into their cows.
Okay, great. This person asks about demographics. Average age of these farmers, and then they say in question marks, management expertise passed down. What's that?
I don't have that figure off my top of my head. We do have some of the survey that I could get from that this year. Most of these guys are in their mid-50s.
Okay.
We have some that are very, much younger. One of the things that we've seen is this demographic of organic dairy farmers is getting older because we haven't had too many new transitions since 2006. So the people that are in it are the ones that have transitioned, and now the question gets to be for some of these farms, who's going to be the next generation to take over the farm? And that's going to be a real challenge in some of these. But we have an aging demographic of our organic dairy farms because we're not getting a new influx of newer farmers, and we're also, limited in the number of farms that have actually transitioned to a new owner within the family in the last 10 years.
And do you think that's comparable to conventional?
I think we have more younger farmers in the conventional than we do in the organic right now. Because we have not had the opportunity for some younger ones to get started in. And one of the problems you have with these farms is that because we have so many of them that are still 50 cows, there's not enough income there to generate enough income for two families. And if you're going to have two families, you have to have enough money for two families to draw family living. And you're not going to do that off of 50, 60 cows. It's just pretty hard to do. And as we take a look at some of the bigger farms, they might have multiple family members in, and it's because they're generating enough income to keep an extra generation on the farm.
I'm sorry, Bob, I think I misspoke. This person was interested, and it's probably because of my interest in farm succession, but they were asking about the average age of the farm, not the farmer. So do you have any sense? Yeah, I'm sorry, that was my mistake.
I'd have to guess, but nearly all these farms were established conventional farms before they went to organic. So this doesn't include Jack Laser. Jack Laser's the processor. So this is most people that have transitioned, and some were, a lot of the early ones that transitioned under the organic cow. These are farms that were in conventional dairy farming and have continued on. There's only a couple farms that could say that they would be new startups, and that was people who decided to get farming and went out and bought their organic dairy herds. So the average age of the farm themselves, some of them might be 4 or 5 generation dairy farms.
Okay, how many low net income farmers do you think are just putting reinvestment monies in as expenses, thus showing low income?
Not many, because there's not much there on the reinvestment. I use the tax depreciation on this, but I do it on a subjective basis because many of the farms have been in the study year after year. There's a real complication that gets in here with Section 179 and writing a lot of expenses off at one time. If someone's depreciation is up a lot in 1 year, I recalculate their depreciation and take some of their Section 179 expenses and put them in over time, so that doesn't really impact a major profit hit on the farm. Now, that's what I do for the study. Basically, a lot of our farms there that are not making much money, they're not making much money, and they're not reinvesting much, and they have a lot of need to do some reinvesting in barns, some equipment repairs. They've got some real problems on equipment. So they're not replacing equipment because they're not making enough money on it.
Okay, there's a couple of questions about the figure of $36,000 for family living expenses. Mm-hmm. So, okay, I'm just going to ask them straight up, and then you can respond. So, one question has said, where did you get that figure? Was it for a family of 4? No. And then, is it sufficient net profit to raise a family? Yeah. So okay. Basically, like, where did you get it, and what does it cover?
The second part is easy. It's not sufficient to pay for family living for a family of 4. Where did I get it? It's not very comparable. I take a figure that comes out of the Northeast Dairy Farm Summary, where they actually come up with the total of money that is used by the family and used by the family for family living. So I keep that figure comparable to the number that's reported in the Northeast Dairy Farm Summary, because that comes out of real precise income tax data where they actually do a cash flow and calculate what the family cost of living is. Is it sufficient? No, it should be higher than that. But I can sit here and say if I raised it, we'd have more farms losing money, and if I lowered it, we'd have less farms losing money and more in that middle level.
Okay. Yep, that sounds good. Are you aware of any other comparable studies being done in other states?
This data all goes to Organic Valley, and Organic Valley has been trying to work with the University of Wisconsin of getting some other data on the economics of organic dairy. They've not had, even in New York and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, they've not had as many farms involved in the study as we've had.
Oh, and somebody, I'm sorry. Someone just piped in that there's some similar data in Minnesota.
Yeah, there is information available at the Center for Farm Financial Management on FinBin, and it's located at the University of Farm Financial Management at the University of Minnesota. And that data, people have access to it, that you can go in and punch in the figures for your farm and actually compare it to similar sized farms that may be organic. How many they have in the database, I don't know.
Maybe they will type in about 40.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
And,
and if you go to finbin.umn.edu, you can maybe take a look there.
And most of those farms in Minnesota and Wisconsin, a lot of those farms try to raise their own grain. So this data gets a little bit unique because it really takes out and separates out what might be the grain cost, because you can actually calculate it. Because if you're raising your own grain, then the price of your grain is tied up in real estate taxes, tractor repairs, fuel, and equipment repairs, and seed costs. And it isn't put in as feed costs.
Okay, so Bob, you talked about feed costs per cow in the 3 groups, but this person is wondering if you could share any more thoughts on the feed costs per hundredweight in the low, mid, and high groups.
Okay, I think I should be able to do that. Okay, for the 3 groups, feed costs for the high group per hundredweight. Let's see, that would come to about $12.37 per hundredweight. For the mid group, it would come to $8.92 per hundredweight, and for the low profit group, it would come to $11.26 per hundredweight. So again, you're paying more feed costs per hundredweight for the more profitable group, but they're selling a lot more milk and it's spread over more cows and more hundredweights.
This person asks, how were the participating farms selected for your study? Do you feel they are a good random representation of the organic industry? This person says in the Northeast, but in the state would be great too.
We do anybody that we can get to say yes. And so the first ones that we try to start out with each year are the ones that were in the study before. Each year we have a couple farms say, no, I don't have time this year. Some of them come back in a year or 2 later. We've had some farms that have been in the study for all 9 years. And then we work with NOFA to identify other farms that might be interested in the study. And so it's not random where we went out and said, okay, these are the farms we'd like to have, but because if they didn't want to participate, they don't have to participate. So the farms are offered $150 for their participation. So we're actually buying their data, and they, their participation in it is, confidential, and they get paid for it. So is it random? It's not entirely random, but I think it is a fairly representative sample, because if we've got 34 farms, that's about 17% of the organic dairy farms in the state of Vermont are included in the study. So just like a little bit short of 1 out of every 5.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But we don't select anybody based on what we think their milk production is or whether they're more profitable or not. There are a couple small herds that we've not included. We had one farm that was in 1 year, and he said he didn't think he ought to be in because he was only milked about 19 cows, and he said his organic dairy was not his main focus because he had about 4 other activities going along. And so we try to make sure that that the focus is primarily dairy, and so there's been several times we've had some small herds that we've talked to that we didn't want in the study because we didn't think that they were really representative of somebody really trying to make a living just from their dairy herd on the farm.
Okay, and for those who aren't familiar with NOFA, it's the Northeast Organic Farming Association. We have NOFAs in each New England state plus New York. Okay, so this person asks about land quality playing a role. So they say, can you describe some more differences between the high profit and lower profit groups between the dairy farmers, and how does land quality play a role? For example, does this influence forage yields significantly? Do you have any data on that?
I don't have the data on that. I'll pick on 3 of our maybe more profitable farms. One is located in a really flat, well-drained, excellent farming area, Franklin County. Another one is a number of miles north of Hardwick in a small valley with limited availability of land. And the other one is in Orange County, and he's got just most of his land is bottom land along the stream. And you got a variation there of the soil types and the skills of all those different farmers. So I don't have enough figures or enough observations to say that the profitability is heavily correlated with the quality of the land that the farm is farming. So I really can't make that statement because I think there seems to be a wide variation of what we're looking at.
Okay. You mentioned that the number of organic dairy farms has remained stable in Vermont. Are there still farms transitioning? Are some leaving, or have people stopped transitioning?
Well, the prime driver on that is not the number of farms transitioning or anything, but new farms that Organic Valley or Horizon are willing to pick up in their market. My understanding is there's been a couple farms transitioned this year, but it was really just a handful. We're getting to the point now that there's always a couple going out of business. So it's a kind of a very steady process right now. And because the market is not expanding as fast as it did, your people that are buying, the organic market doesn't want to get oversaturated, or so it seems to be. So they're not taking on a lot of new farms right now. So if you did want to transition, you could transition to organic, but you wouldn't be guaranteed that someone would stop to pick up your milk.
Okay, do you have any idea of the forage yield ton per acre on these farms, and the forage types?
Okay, the forage types are primarily mixed grasses, so some mixed legumes. Very few of them have done any seeding recently, and so you've got your mix of grasses that you're harvesting. Now, as far as yields, we've not asked that information because some of that is available through NOFA whenever people fill out their application and for NOFA certification every year. But I've not accessed that yield data. So I'm not even going to venture because I don't have that type of information.
Okay, what about costs of replacement breeding stock, either raised or on farm? Either raised on farm or purchased. Do you have any of that type of information?
It swings depending on what the market is. One of the farms in the study this year sold, I think, like 40 cows, and his animals went out of state. I think they went to Pennsylvania. And there's another organic herd that I know that bought cows recently within the last year, and they bought a herd from Pennsylvania. So we got cows leaving and coming and going. Basically, right now, most of your organic cows tend to be, seem like they're running about the same price as your conventional cows right now. During the early period, 2006, 2009, up until we got a quota put on, by the organic companies, you could count $1,500 to $2,000 for organic cows. I mean, there was just a shortage of them. People were looking for cows. Now it's it tends more throughout the year, but right now you have your organic cows are running about the same as conventional, or just a little bit more. But that's it's in that price range right now. As far as the cost of raising a heifer, I haven't worked any of that cost out. Again, a lot of the smaller farms, it's really hard to calculate what the cost is to really raise heifers whenever it's primarily family labor and also, keeping them in the facilities. But with most farms, there's one farm in the study that he has someone raises heifers, and he has a set deal where he gives up, so many heifer calves and gets a bred heifer back, and the calf raiser thinks he's doing okay, and the farmer thinks he's doing okay, and that works out for them. But most farmers are trying to raise their own. Some farms have made out quite well by having a surplus of animals to try to sell. Some haven't been able to get to that point, and they need all their replacements just to keep the same herd size.
Okay, and I think we have time for one last question, which is, how did you assign a value for homegrown forages?
I didn't assign a value for homegrown forages.
Okay.
So there is no feed cost in there for forages. The only cost that's in there for forages is if people actually bought it, and we try to keep that separated out, so we try to know each year of how much of the purchase feed cost is for forage and how much is for grain. And consistently over the years of the study, on average, most of our forage cost on average has been less than, ranged from like about 4 to 7% of total feed costs. But we don't put any value on the feed that's raised on the farm as a feed cost. Those feed costs are wrapped up, excuse me, in the other categories of fuel, labor, machinery operation, depreciation, and repairs, as they are on any other, most of your conventional dairy farms too.
Okay. Bob, thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.